What I have discovered is the most important thing in life.
Oh, hey, and welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast, presented by Hippo Direct. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur or innovator every single Wednesday morning who's unleashing creativity to grow their business. I'm your host, Max Brandstetter, digital marketing dude at Hippo Direct, and you can email me at max@hippodirect.com with any questions on digital marketing or podcasting. This is episode number 33, and boy, do we have something seriously cool for you today. Our guest is Susan Bennett, and she is the original voice of Siri. She's been featured on more TV shows than most people you know, and on more iPhones than everyone you know. Hear how she became Siri, what her life is like, and what you can do to break out of your comfort zone. It's Seriously Susan. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with an incredibly special guest, Seriously Susan, Susan Bennett, the original voice of Siri herself. How are you doing today, Susan?
Hi, Max.
Oh my God, that probably never gets old, does it?
Not for some people.
Yeah, this is so special and surreal. Siri on the other end. I mean, I don't know how much you get mistaken for Siri on a day-to-day basis, but anybody that hears you in audio form surely is very familiar with your voice. I'm very excited for our interview today, and we'll talk a little bit about your journey, a little bit about the industry as a whole, and some other fun stuff. Just to get us started, the first thing that is on everyone's mind, how did you become Siri? How did that process get started?
Well, very interesting. I don't know. Apple has never really disclosed how they ended up choosing the voice, and I never worked directly with Apple, and I've spoken to other original Siri voices. Of course, there was more than one. I was the English voice worldwide, but then, of course, they had different voice actors doing different languages for different countries. And I've spoken to some of those other people, and they had the same experience, which was we worked for a company called Nuance, which is an IVR company, interactive voice response.
Mm-hmm.
And the recordings that we did were for them, and we were paid by them. And then Apple apparently got our voices from them. And I think, if I'm correct about this, I think Apple did purchase Nuance. And so that's how that all happened. But I do know that from a personal perspective, I would not have been the voice of Siri if I had not already been a voice actor. So from my perspective, that's how it ended up happening.
Right. So in terms of the actual, like the first day that you started the recordings for what, unbeknownst to you, would end up to be Siri, what was that like? Like what was the actual work like, and how time consuming was it?
Well, it was very time consuming. The initial recordings were done in 2005, and the scripts were very different from any other scripts that I had read. I worked 4 hours a day, 5 days a week for an entire month. And that was just for the initial vocabulary. I did some updates for about 4 months in 2011 and 12. But the original recordings, the initial recordings, the scripts were very strange, and it was very tedious work because I'll explain the whole process. The scripts that we read were made up of phrases and sentences that were created to get all of the sound combinations in the language. And so what that means is the phrases and sentences were totally nonsensical because they were created just for sound and not at all for meaning or content. So I was reading stuff like cow hoist in the tub hut today, militia oi hallucinate, buckra okra ooze. And then there were repetitive things where you're trying to get different vowel sounds within a particular word. So you'd read something over and over, like say the shrouding again, say the shredding 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 again. So it was extremely tedious. And yes, I do attribute any kind of loss of gray matter to that particular experience.
Well, I think you still have plenty of gray matter.
Oh, thank you. There's a little bit left, yeah. But
Yeah.
anyway, those recordings were done, and afterwards, technicians and computers would go into the recordings, extract sounds, reform these sounds into new phrases and sentences, and these are what ended up on our devices. It's called concatenation. So Siri was the first concatenated voice that sounded human and that you could interact with. the older concatenated voices sounded like this. Hello, how are you? Very robotic sounding. And, I don't think people realize that Siri was sort of the first public manifestation of AI. And they've been working on AI since the late 60s or early 70s. So it took many, many years to create Siri. And so that's why she was so iconic. Suddenly we had this little computerized phone system that could talk back to us.
Yeah, and everyone is familiar with her. But I'm just blown away from those sentences that you mentioned that you had to read, before everything was concatenated. I don't think I could even just say one of those sentences stand alone. The fact that you did that for months on end is impressive. They're pretty intricate combinations of words and sounds, and it's very fascinating how that's the kind of thing that I guess is just combined into creating actual sentences.
Yes. Well, the first iteration of that type of work, I worked for Lucent Technologies. And boy, that was really tough. I had to wear this thing around my throat called a laryngograph because it went over the larynx to measure sound waves. And the director I had was really exacting. Everything had to be so articulate and said so perfectly that it was really, really strange. I mean, I think Lucent went out of business, but that may be why.
Maybe, yeah. I don't think people are too fond of wearing things around their throat.
That was very weird. So
yeah,
the recordings were very, very tedious because in order for the recordings to be right for the concatenation process, we had to read each sentence and phrase exactly the same. So the same pacing, the same tone, the same pitch. So it was very, very hard, not only on the psyche, but it was very hard on the vocal cords, because when we speak, we go up and down, we take breaks. And yeah, that was pretty hard work. They wanted to put me under contract for 5 years. And I said, no, I think I've killed enough brain cells already. Thank you.
5 years. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Siri would be speaking languages that don't even exist by that point. But this can apply to people in any job if they're doing something that's super tedious. Mentally, how did you get through that? How did you get yourself motivated to go to work every day? And even though this is tedious and even though you're losing gray matter, as you said, how did you keep chugging along and keep that, enthusiasm and that wonderful voice throughout it?
Well, you just had to focus. I just had to focus on what I was doing, making sure that every little, sound, every little consonant and vowel was pronounced. And of course, I did take a lot of breaks. They did, let me take some breaks. And of course, I was a brat. I was recording in my home studio, so I just go down to my jammies in the morning and sit there for 4 hours. So it wasn't as bad as a lot of jobs. I think just focusing was the main thing.
Yeah, totally. And when did you first know that you were actually Siri?
Well, Siri appeared on October 4th, 2011, and that's when I found out. A fellow voice actor emailed me and said, hey, we're playing around with this new Apple iPhone app. Isn't this you? And I went, what? So I went on the Apple site and listened and was horrified. I had absolutely no idea. I felt very ambivalent about it because on one hand, I thought, well, wow, I'm basically the new voice of Apple, really? And then the other hand, I'm going, oh, wait a minute. I've never worked directly for Apple. What's going on here? And who is this Siri person? So that was the beginning of a whole new era in my life.
Right. Yeah. What was your gut reaction when you thought, holy shit, millions and millions of people are going to hear my voice every single day?
Yeah. Well, there's a very, like everything else in life, if you really think about it, it had a big positive and it had a big negative. And so it took me 2 whole years to reveal myself as the voice because I wasn't really sure I could deal with it. I'm kind of an introvert. I am an introvert, and I can rise to the occasion because I am a musician. I've had to perform in my life and get up on stage. I don't have a problem with that, but it's the length of time. After a while, it's sort of like, okay, I need to go home. I need to go home and by myself and read my book.
Right.
So I wasn't sure how I was going to face whatever fame was going to come with it. And I also didn't like the fact that we humans really do love to stereotype. And especially in my business, people really do like to typecast you. And I knew that if people knew that I was the voice of Siri, that they would think that that's all I could do. Especially in our very ADD culture now, people really don't spend time looking into what else you can do. It's sort of like, oh, she's Siri. Well, never mind.
Or like, she's Siri, this is the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, she's Siri, but oh, well, she's Siri, so she works for Apple, and that's that. So, yeah, I really had to do a lot of soul searching. It took me a long time. And
Hmm.
finally, my husband and son, the females in my life were very understanding of me. But my husband and son said, "You're an idiot. This is a huge opportunity. You need to do this." Finally, they got through to me, and they were right. Sometimes when you step out of your proverbial comfort zone, the universe is with you. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
Very grateful to old Siri.
It's an amazing story, and it is very cool that you've made that jump. But I'm curious, before we get into that for a little bit, I'm curious, how much does it affect you now on the day-to-day basis? Like when you're at the grocery store, do people recognize your voice, or is it kind of incognito?
No, not at all. That's the nice thing. In fact, in all the years that I was on the iPhone, only two people recognized my voice in real life. One was a banker and one was a waiter. And I told them both, I said, "Oh, you guys are in the wrong industry. If your ears are this good, you need to be working in audio somewhere." Yeah, but mostly, when I speak, the Siri voice is not exactly my voice. They took my voice and manipulated it a bit. Because when my husband, who is an audio engineer and a guitar player, we made up a little conversation between Susan Bennett and Siri. And when he was doing the Siri voice, he really had to do some manipulating and compressing and that sort of thing to make it sound like Siri. So first of all, people don't expect to hear the Siri voice coming out of human. So they don't expect to hear it. So they're not really hearing it.
Right.
Also, it would be tough to really recognize it because I speak up here and the original Siri mostly spoke down there. So, if I walked around talking like that, it might be a different story, so.
Holy cow. Yeah.
That's the nice thing is that I really don't have that kind of fame. I just don't know what I would do if I had that kind of fame where people recognized me everywhere I went. That would be really bad. I'm glad I don't have that kind of fame.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, you don't look like the iPhone screen when you're walking around, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, I consider that a big plus.
So you mentioned that you finally made that jump after you thought about it and did some soul searching. You finally made that jump and got from out of the voice booth to on stage in these speaking events. What's the biggest difference you've noticed from speaking into a microphone in a booth like we are now versus speaking to a crowd of people?
Oh, it's night and day. First of all, from a vocal point of view, it's a totally different approach. Speaking events, of course, you still have a microphone. It's not quite as far as theater. Of course, they're mic'd in the theater now too, but in the theater, you really have to project. And when you're dealing with a big audience, you have to project. Whereas in front of a microphone, you really have to be careful not to project too much. A little is a lot in front of a microphone in a small booth. So it's a totally different approach.
I want to transition a little bit into the industry as a whole, the voice industry, and what we're seeing with this boom of audio now, especially with assistants like Siri and, you got Alexa, you have so many smart speakers nowadays, and podcast listening has increased like crazy. So I want to dive into that a little bit. For anybody that is interested in a career as a voiceover artist or has their own podcast or anything like that, what tips do you have as far as making sure that you sound your best as much as possible? Like, do you have any routines? Is there anything you drank, something like that for your vocal cords?
Well, I think first of all, you have to try to take care of your voice. Don't overuse it. Try to use it intelligently. Don't do stuff like sugar, dairy, and alcohol. So in other words, don't have any fun.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah. No, there are certain vocal exercises that you can do and that I like to do to warm myself up. But as far as the voiceover industry, it's totally unrecognizable from when I broke into it because there used to be a structure. And now there really isn't a structure. It's sort of like, I call it the Wild West of voiceover now, because everybody wants to get into voiceover. Everybody wants to get that one commercial that's going to pay them $100,000. And so everybody is getting into it. So you've got a lot of amateurs involved, and you've got all these websites like voices.com and voice123. And the structure in the past was that the director, the writer, producer, whatever, would go to your agent and say, okay, this is what I'm looking for. And the agent would come up with 10 or 15 people and say, and have auditioned those people. And I was exclusive with an agency here in Atlanta for many years. And so that exclusivity helped me as well, because my agents would say, well, you should really talk to Susan Bennett because she's very versatile. She takes direction well. She always shows up on time, blah, blah, blah. I had a lot of help at that time. Now you're really on your own. In order to compete in today's voiceover world, you really do need to have your own setup. And of course, it's never been easier than, ever to have your own setup. You just need a smartphone, a mixer face, a good microphone, and a closet, basically. And yes, and internet connection, so it's totally different. From my point of view, tips, all I can say is that voiceover is a lot more than just having a good voice or an unusual voice. You start there, but basically for a lot of what you're trying to do, and you really have to, there's a lot of competition, so you have to be good at what you do. So from my point of view, you want to start with having the skills. One of the skills is being able to read well, and have the vocabulary to be able to sit down and just, read something cold. It's not as vital as it used to be. When I started out, I used to have to read whole paragraphs or whole pages without a mistake because it was being put onto tape, and people
Right.
didn't want to have to slice the tape and every time you made a mistake. Now, of course, everything's digital and everything's done with the computer, and it's so much easier and quicker. So it's totally changed. And basically, you don't really have to be quite as professional as you used to have to be, but you still have to be able to act. And you still have to be able to take direction. So I always encourage people to take classes of any kind, whether it's with voice coaches or, group coaching, but also acting classes, being able to really express yourself, especially just through the voice. And for any of your listeners who are really, really interested in this, go to my website, susancbennett.com, and contact me through that. And I'd be happy to send you a doc that I put together to tell you how to go about doing this if you're really serious about it.
Perfect. And appreciate the serious pun as well. Seriously, Susan.
Yeah,
you can't resist.
Everything is serious. Siri us.
Exactly. No, those are really good tips. And you mentioned the reading. Of course, you have to be good at reading. I mean, in this industry, if you're not, I imagine it just makes things exponentially harder. How did you personally get better at that? I mean, do you spend a lot of time reading outside of your work?
Oh, I do. I read all the time. And I love words.
That's a good thing.
Yes, my interest in that has helped me. But also, it's funny, I look back, sometimes we can tell what we're going to do in adulthood by what attracts us as kids. And I can remember, I think it was second grade, and I remember this kid's name, Nancy Lawton. I was so envious of her because she could just pick up a book and read flawlessly. And I just thought, oh, that is so cool. I really want to learn how to do that. And so somewhere in the gray matter, it was just already starting, that I was interested in reading and speaking. So yes, I do a lot of reading, and I encourage people to read. And, with depending on what you're doing, radio and TV commercials, you're not going to have to learn big words. But if you end up doing technical narrations or medical narrations, you really have to be able to understand the construction of words, what syllables are. And if you have to guess the pronunciation of something, you need to have a little bit of that background to help you out there, I think.
Yeah.
My approach is never stop learning, always try to keep your mind open and learn whatever you can learn, because it will do nothing but help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've gotten more into reading as I've, started to lose my gray matter as well. No, I'm just kidding. I've gotten more into reading, and I've always been obsessed with learning as well. And part of what I love about this sort of content or digital age is there's so many amazing resources and quick ways to get information and read about insightful things. How about you personally? What type of reading is your favorite? Like what genre of books do you like to read?
Well, I really like fiction. And I really love to read literature, books that are where you notice how beautiful the language is. Now, sometimes that can be, I also like to mix it up with, murder mysteries and things like that, just, for fun. But I'm also been studying Spanish for many years. And although I try to read books in Spanish, I do get frustrated because, I feel like I spend most of my, anything that would be like Isabel Allende or something like that, I'd spend most of my time in the Spanish dictionary. So
right.
which kind of limits the fun factor. Yeah.
Yeah. And any specific books that you want to shout out? Any favorites that come to mind?
Oh dear, you would ask me that. I read so many that and I read on my Kindle, and so consequently, a lot of times I forget the titles. I'm reading something called, I think it's called Essex Serpent right now, and that's wow, it's really amazingly written.
Hmm.
So I'm sort of enjoying that. In fact, I went on Facebook the other day and said, "Okay, I'm looking for a book. Let me know what you're reading." And it was so cool to have so many people write in and make suggestions. And so it's
Oh,
good to know that people are still reading out there. It's great.
yeah, that's amazing. And that's something we talk about with a lot of our podcast guests. And from the episodes that we've done so far, we've compiled a reading list of all their favorites. So I think you'd appreciate that. It's on our Hippo Direct blog, hippodirect.com/blog, but we share it out a lot. And, we're in the same boat. We love reading and love hearing about what books are most interesting to people. So we'll make sure to add yours to the list as well. But anyway, there's so many good ones. And actually a lot of the top ones, especially in the business world, come up very frequently among entrepreneurs and creative business people. So it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
On that creativity note, what else do you do to stay creative, to stay inspired? I mean, you mentioned you are a musician, as is your husband.
Yes, music is probably the defining thing in my life. And it was the thing that actually led me to voiceover because I was started playing the piano by ear when I was about 3 or 4. And my parents were not musical, so a next door neighbor heard me playing on this toy piano, and he called my parents and said, "I think you have a musical child. She's playing songs on this on this one octave piano."
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was an elderly man, and he was about to move, and he gave me his upright piano. And so I started taking piano lessons, which I did for, oh gosh, I think about 12 years. And so I play piano and keyboard bass and sing. And my husband and I had a private event band for a couple of decades, actually. And now we're just playing for fun, really. He works, regularly, still playing music, but
Right.
we work together in a band called Boomers Gone Wild, and we play nothing but 60s and 70s rock and soul music, and it's so much fun because everybody in the band plays by ear, and so people shout out requests, and we just kind of bumble through it. It's just a lot of fun.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. And I mean, I love the tie-in between the voiceover business and the music business. I mean, they go hand in hand. But Boomers Gone Wild, I love that name. Is there a place that people can check you guys out?
Yeah, we play once. We play the first Sunday of every month, unless it's an odd time, and we didn't play Super Bowl Sunday. But the first Sunday of every month in Dahlonega, Georgia, which is about an hour north of Atlanta,
Mm,
in a little club called the Crimson Moon, and it's very, very cool.
awesome. And are you guys on YouTube? Is there any videos of you or places online, or is it
I
pretty
think
offline?
unfortunately the videos are pretty raw.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. We don't
Okay.
have any, promotional materials. Let's put it that way. It's really strictly a fun thing.
Yeah. Also, on this creativity note, how about people? Who was the most influential for you to start speaking into a microphone and get into this voice world in the first place?
Well, I got into it by accident. I used to work, there was a fabulous studio in Atlanta called Doppler Studios, and they were there for close to 50 years. They just closed a couple of years ago. And I used to work there all the time during a time when you could actually have a career singing jingles, which is what
Yeah.
I do. And I sang lead on a lot of things, and I also sang in groups. And one day we had finished singing for a particular product, which I don't really remember.
Must have been a fantastic product.
Yeah, it really must have impressed me. But the voice actor didn't show up to read the copy for the spot. So the studio owner at the time, Pete Caldwell, said, "Susan, you don't have an accent. Come over here and read this copy." And I was able to do it pretty easily. And I thought, oh, ding, 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 because, we're all freelancers, always, scraping and scrabbling, looking for more work. So I thought, oh, I can do this. So I got
Right.
a voice coach and then a talent agent, and I've been doing that ever since.
Wow. And so, well, let's go back to like when you first recorded for Siri, for example. If you were doing that 4 hours a day, outside of those 4 hours, how much time were you spending on, with a voice coach or focusing on your voice and making sure that you were ready for when you were on and actually recording?
Well, it's a funny thing. There's a fine line between doing too much work and not doing enough work because, your vocal cords, you can strengthen them by working, make sure you're using them correctly.
Right.
I really didn't do a whole lot outside of the Siri recordings when I was recording those initial ones. It was July of 2005, and the summertime is a typically very slow time for voice work. Any kind of advertising. They don't, start up again till late July or 1st of August for back to school type things. And
Mhm.
so I really didn't have a lot of other work. I was working with my band on the weekends. But yeah, that work was very exacting and was very, very tiring. And so I didn't do a lot of outside work at that time. I basically I worked those 4 hours and then I basically shut up for the rest of the day, ready for the next day. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have to know yourself. You
Yeah.
have to know yourself. I've had to fight allergies, all my life too. And so you really have to know yourself and your limitations and what works for you. As in life everywhere, you get to, know yourself, know who you are and what you need.
Yeah. I think the vast majority of people would be shocked to know that Siri has to battle with allergies.
Well, it's not as bad as it used to be. That's the nice thing about allergies. Sometimes, your body's supposedly changes completely every 7 years. So the things I
Mm,
used to be horrifically allergic to, are no longer a problem. So that's a big plus.
that's good. Yeah. It's an ongoing battle for myself as well. I cannot, because springtime is very rough. Let's just say that.
Can you imagine getting a 100% open rate on your next marketing message? Well, you can with extra large postcards that are impossible to ignore. Hippo Direct can help you find the perfect list of proven direct mail responders. We can even help lay out and design the postcard for you. Check us out at hippodirect.com.
Let's transition here. Just a couple quicker segments here before we wrap up. The first one is a recurring segment we do, which is the Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
The Wild Business Shout Out of the Week!
Wild Business Shout Out of the Week. This is where we talk about a marketing campaign, advertising campaign that stuck out to us and why. So there's a pretty historic one that we were chatting about earlier. You want to talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, it's funny because I don't pay as much attention to commercials as I used to because, thanks to Netflix and Amazon, most of what I watch is commercial less. But
Yeah.
I'll have to say I was extremely impressed by the Got Milk campaign because not only was it just, ubiquitous, it was everywhere. It was very prevalent and people just locked onto it right away and remembered it. Other products, other companies started using that phrase for their own product, like, got milk, okay, got Coke. Well, they did, of course, Coca-Cola didn't do that. But
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I'm sure it would be just, more, perhaps local companies taking over that. But it became a phrase. It became a catchphrase. And so, boy, oh boy, you don't get, better advertising than that. And so I don't know who invented that, who came up with that phrase, but that was just genius.
Yeah, that's an amazing one. And it's still one of the first ones that comes to mind. So it's withstood the test of time, which is difficult for any campaign to do. There's a few different touch points of where I actually came across that campaign in my life. Obviously, there was tons of magazine ads I saw growing up. I remember in middle school, there were these posters. So of course, they're all about, middle schoolers having strong bones and things like that. So there were all these posters with the athletes with the got milk. And I studied marketing and entrepreneurship in college. I had a consumer behavior class and we studied famous campaigns like this. And the origin of the Got Milk campaign was very fascinating because it was basically an approach of deprivation. They found out that people, when they were thinking about milk, they weren't too interested in it just being milk, but people love to have it with their cookies. They love to have it with their cereal. And they approach people and were like, hey, could you imagine eating these other things or doing these other things when you couldn't have milk?
Right.
And that's sort of where the whole got milk thing was born. Or like, hey, you got it? And so that's a really, really good example. That's a strong one. So anyway, that's Got Milk. So this has been sponsored. No, I'm just kidding. So let's wrap up here with some rapid fire Q&A.
All
You
right.
ready for it? All right, let's get wild. What is your favorite Siri phrase of all time?
Oh, wow. Let's see. Oh, wow. Well, see, the fact that I didn't actually say phrases, and I don't talk to Siri.
Right. It may, so you don't talk to Siri. Is this just like weird you out or?
Oh yeah, when my voice was on, it was just too strange to talk to this little and have my own voice come back at me. It was just too weird. But,
Yeah.
I love it when she says, when she just won't commit to anything. She'll say something, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. I don't understand.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. Okay. And you're a big musician. What's your favorite instrument that you've ever played?
Oh, well, let's see. I tried the viola. That was a disaster. Never really attracted to any kind of horn. I think I've always just played keyboard. But I'll tell you what, my favorite thing about playing the keyboard now is that I split my keyboard in half, and the left hand side is bass and connected to a bass amp. And I love playing bass.
Oh.
That's really a favorite thing for me. And I've done it so much now that I had to play a gig for New Year's Eve, and they had a bass player, and I was just supposed to play incidental keyboard, and I really felt like I had to tie my left hand behind my back.
Yeah.
I think probably my favorite instrument of all time, though, is guitar. And my husband is a fabulous guitar player. I can play the guitar, but I don't do it often enough to be good at it. Mostly just play keyboard.
I'm sure you're better than you say you are. But actually, a little behind the scenes here, when we did our brief sound check, your husband was actually playing guitar in the background.
Right. Yes, he was in the basement. He was really he was up to 11. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I thought. I was expecting to hear the voice of Siri, and I heard a fantastic guitar solo.
Yeah.
Okay, what is your favorite Netflix show?
Oh, Netflix show. Well, you mean just streaming in general?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Netflix earlier, so I'm not sure if it's shows or movies that you watch, but anything that comes out to you that.
Oh, well, I think probably my favorite series, it's a toss-up between The Sopranos and Dexter.
Oh, yeah, classics.
And I know it's sort of like, oh, Siri is kind of macabre. You watch out for Siri. She knows where you live. And she does.
Oh, my God. Yeah, she does. She's in your pocket or purse all the time.
Yeah, I love those series, and I hate the fact that I know them so well that I can't go back and watch them right now because it's, I just know them too well. But the acting is just incredible.
Yeah.
We enjoyed The Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as, I love movies, really love movies. And
oh, yeah. What's your favorite?
well, right now, it's neck and neck between Bohemian Rhapsody and Green Book.
Oh.
And I really hate that there weren't that many really stellar movies in 2018 to me. And so I really hate that those two fabulous movies are really pitted against each other. And I'm really sorry that Rami Malek and Viggo Mortensen can't both win.
Right. My parents are incredibly huge Queen fan, and I like Queen as well, but they saw Bohemian Rhapsody like the first weekend it came out, and they just could not speak any higher of it. Apparently he did an incredible job.
Yeah, Rami Malek. And from what I read, or someone told me, that he spent 4 years working on that character, and I'll tell you what, he looked just like Freddie Mercury, and he even did some of the singing, and you couldn't tell which was Freddie and which was Rami. So I mean, that was just an incredibly stellar performance, really amazing.
I trust your kind words towards him because you must have a pretty good ear when it comes to audio.
Well, the thing is too that there's something about his performance. There's something about that movie that you can watch it over and over again. It's just very compelling, and there are a lot of things about Freddie that you just don't know. I mean, mostly people know, oh yeah, he died of AIDS and he was gay. Well, actually, he was bisexual, and he had a long relationship with a woman, and it was just a lot of interesting things. And I don't think most people knew that he really sort of directed the band and the recordings. A lot of the recordings that they did, and a lot of, it was a lot of his ideas, production ideas in the studio. So, I mean, I learned a lot about him just from the movie. So,
yeah,
but it's also extremely entertaining. They did a great job getting actors that looked very much like the actual guys in the band, and yeah, it was great.
Yeah. What's your biggest pet peeve?
Biggest pet peeve? Oh, I think it's probably the abuse of the English language.
That's a good one.
People say things wrong all the time and forget writing and punctuation and grammar. That's gone. That's totally gone. But I think the English language is so cool. because it's so precise. You can say exactly what you mean if you have the vocabulary. And, we're not doing that anymore. We're speaking in symbols and emojis and that sort of thing. And I really hate it. I'm studying Spanish, and, it's interesting that you can say in 2 words in English what will take you like 8 words in Spanish. And because I think there are like 225,000 words in Spanish, but there are over 1 million in English. So you can be really, really precise. Like I was asking my Spanish teacher, I said, well, how do you say dread in Spanish? And she said, well, miedo. And I said, well, that's fear. And fear and dread, they're similar, but they're not exactly the same. And so English is so beautiful, and it's kind of going away. So I think that's my biggest pet peeve.
Sí, yeah. Claro que sí. And the last question then. Out of all the millions of English words, what is your favorite word?
Wow. Favorite English word. Oh, wow. Let me think about that.
It could be wow.
No, that's far too uninteresting.
I'm just messing with you.
Oh, wow. I'm sitting here thinking, and nothing but Spanish words are coming to mind.
Oh, isn't that funny how that works?
You put me on the spot, and I'm just running away.
Maybe what is your favorito palabra de español?
Perspicacious.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Perspicacious.
Perspicacious?
Perspicacious, which means you can really see through things.
Ooh.
Perspicacious. Yeah, that's a good one.
Guess who learned a new word today?
Yeah. Well, it's not like you'd use it very often. No, first of all, no one would know what it meant.
That's a great one. Cool.
I love all these weird words. And it's funny in Spanish, I learned it from the beginning. I mean, I learned it. I didn't just learn phrases. I learned the actual verbs and the conjugations and the grammar and syntax and all of that. And it's really funny, the words that will stay in my memory. I have some just weird words that you almost never use. So I just have this weird thing about words. So
yeah, well, it's a good skill to have.
It's fun. I find at least it's amusing. And at least I'm using my brain, which is very important. Use your brain.
It is. Yeah. Words to live by. Well, thank you so much, Susan. This has been amazing. I really appreciate you sharing your story, the Siri story, the Susan Bennett story, and much, much more. Thanks for taking the time out of your day. And for anybody that wants to reach out to you, where's the best place to connect with you?
I would say probably reach out to me through email, and you can find that on my website, which is susancbennett.com, BENNETT. And I'm on social media, although I will have to say that I do have someone that really deals with that for me. It's at Seriously Susan for Twitter and Instagram, and the Facebook page is Susan Bennett Voice of Siri. And Seriously is SIRIOUSLY, Seriously.
Well, I'm a huge fan of the pun as well, so I appreciate
it. Oh, good. Well, there you go.
Yeah, but I noticed, you have, let's just say a few Twitter followers. How much does that impact your day-to-day? Are you involved with that at all, or is it all your partner?
Well, it's mostly I have a fabulous person, Ben Landis, with Fanbase, and he basically takes care of most of the Twitter situation. My podcast partner, Randall Kenneth Jones, look up his podcast as well, jones.show. He does a lot of my social media too, because, I'm just not of the generation that is particularly attracted to that. And on top of being kind of an introvert, it's sort of like, well, do I really want to put myself out there to this many people? I'll have to say that I was kind of disappointed in Twitter in the sense that I wanted to put myself out there to do more beneficial stuff for my career and for other people. And for the most part, I think that it kind of stays on a bit of a superficial, shallow level. So that's been kind of a disappointment. So I'm not a huge social media person, although I do understand its importance.
Right. And you got a couple million followers. Was that built up kind of after you became public with the whole Siri thing, or like when it evolved?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. No one's interested in Susan Bennett. People are interested.
I'm interested in Susan.
Well, thank you, Max. The whole Siri thing opened up. I have to say this. It was a life lesson for me, because when I first found out about it, I was not that thrilled. And then once I learned to accept it, that's a huge thing in life, is acceptance. it wasn't something that I could change. I had to change myself to adapt to it. Siri wasn't going away. I wasn't going to be able to sue Apple. Those things were not going to happen. And so I had to figure out a way to turn it to the positive for me. And once I did that scary thing, it was scary to me to come out as Siri. And so I was really holding off. But once I faced that fear and jumped out of the old comfort zone, boy, oh boy, the universe was really with me. I just had all sorts of really incredible opportunities and experiences. I was on just tons of TV shows. And the most important two things that happened is I got fabulous agents in Los Angeles at Vox Inc. Wes Stevens and Tom Lawless. They're fantastic. They've done great things for me. But the most surprising thing was a brand new career of Siri appearances and speaker events. And of course, I probably would not have been able to achieve that or have that kind of career without the notoriety of being Siri. And so it was a great life lesson for me. And I just, I'm very grateful for it. So it's been a very positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Seriously, as one would say.
Seriously.
Yeah. So last thing here, do you have a final quote or just a one-line final thought to end with? Whatever you want. The stage is yours. Siri has the booth.
Okay. Everyone, what I have discovered is the most important thing in life. Have a sense of humor.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Susan Bennett, the voice of Siri.
Thank you, Max. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
I don't know about you, but I will never think of Siri the same way again. And I mean that in the best way. Thank you so much, Susan. That was incredible. Thank you, wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. Here are some things you can try out with Siri or without. Hey Siri, I'd like to subscribe to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. I'd like to leave a review for the Wild Business Growth Podcast. Take me to hippodirect.com/blog. Take me to hippodirect.com/newsletter. Take me to Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, where I can connect with Hippo Direct and Max Brandstetter. All right, that's all for this week's episode. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!